Hey everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I wanted to come on and share a process video with you guys on how I made this almost single layer card. It's using a couple of Lawn Fawn stamp sets, mostly from this Christmas Dreams stamp set, which I absolutely fell in love with the minute I saw it. This is a new release this year, and I absolutely love the cozy scenes you can create with it. I'm gonna do a little bit of stamping and stamp masking. This is me putting a little post-it note where I wanted to create a mask for the thought bubble or the dream bubble and this little puppy. So I've stamped onto the kind of sticky portion of the post-it note paper, and I'm just fussy cutting that out because I wanted to do some stamp masking so that this puppy appeared in front and as well as the thought bubble, and then the rest of the scene would kind of be behind these images. And that's really basically the way you should think about stamp masking. Whatever is in the foreground or in front, you stamp first, you mask those off, and then you stamp the images that you want behind or around. So in this instance, I've got the rug there, and I'm also trying to figure out where I want to put the fireplace as well as the Christmas tree. I've realized that the Christmas tree will be in front of the fireplace, so I need to stamp those two pieces out before I stamp the fireplace. So I've got the mask on the little puppy, and I've stamped out the Christmas tree, and I realize I need to create a mask at least for the right side of that Christmas tree, and so I'm gonna create another little mask with the post-it note paper again, and I'm just gonna fussy cut just the right side of this Christmas tree. And that's the kind of cheat for stamp masking, and why I like doing that to create layered looks rather than stamping each individual piece out separately and then fussy cutting all of those out and then creating a layered scene. Stamp masking allows you to create those kind of 3D scenes without having to do all of the fussy cutting. Now I am trying to figure out the positioning of that fireplace. And also I decided I was going to try and see about the placement of the little bone present that the little puppy's going to be dreaming about. And I realized, oh no, the mask needs to stay on that thought bubble before I stamp out the fireplace. And I'm going to stamp that out. And as you can see now, I can pull off the mask of the thought bubble. And now I can stamp out that bone present that the little puppy's going to be dreaming about. And that, I think, is pretty much the main stamped scene from that Christmas Dreams Lawn Fawn stamp set. Just on the edges, I didn't get the masking completely covered, so I'm filling in the lines. I didn't cut out the mask fully, right? I left the little thought bubble bubbles attached to that big thought bubble, and I decided I wanted one more thought bubble, so I just doodled one in with my Copic multi-liner pen. And now I've taken another Lawn Fawn stamp set. This is Ready, Set, Snow from a couple years ago. And I thought that would be a nice kind of scene to put into a picture above the fireplace, above the mantle, because I thought that looked a little bit bare and I wanted the whole scene to kind of be a little more full. You can see I'm off center as well, but that's because I've cut my card front a little bit larger than I need. And I was thinking I might use something the right area of this card front for something else. So I'm just doodling in here, and I'm making sure I leave enough space around the top and the bottom of this card front while I'm doing this doodling. And it's really simple. I'm just using a straight edge, and I've taken this Copic multi-liner pen. I find that the 0.1 point marker or pen works perfectly. It coordinates really nicely in terms of the thickness with Lawn Fawn stamps. So I'm just doodling in this frame of this picture. And when I finish, I kind of realized that it's a little bit varying in thickness, the frame. So I decided I'm just going to doodle in some wood grain. I end up covering all of this up, but in the meantime, I'm trying to camouflage the fact that the left side of that frame is a little too thin as compared to the others. And that's really because I didn't take my time in doodling this and didn't properly measure the distances. And I eyeballed it, and I didn't eyeball it correctly. But I think it looks great with that wood grain just doodled in. And now I'm starting the Copic coloring. I'm trying to keep a pretty tight color palette. It's some pastels, some yellows. This is kind of a lemony yellow, a coral color, and I'm going to repeat the colors throughout this scene so that it looks more cohesive. That's one of the tricks of coloring, I think, is that if you're able to repeat a color in multiple places, it actually makes the whole scene look more cohesive. So for the baubles, the star, some of the little buildings in the Christmas village scene, I've repeated that coral color and the yellow. Now I'm going in with a blue-green. This is kind of like an aqua or teal color, and I'm repeating that not only in the little chapel, but also in the baubles. I've decided I'm going to add this kind of true blue. It's a little bit cornflowery, I guess, and I've decided to repeat that color not only in the baubles, but also in the puppy's rug and on the bow and his bone present. And I decide I need to use that color a little bit more above, so I've also decided to color up some of the little village house portions with that blue. And I like the variations in all of these colors throughout that little village scene, but I felt like it was missing something. I'm kind of struggling at this point, trying to figure out where to repeat the colors, and I'm not quite satisfied. So I decided to move over to the fire because I knew that would be kind of a more true red, the coral, and then the yellow. And I decide, I know that the puppy's going to have a little bit of this brown. I figure like a craft color brown is a good neutral to put into spots for the puppy as well as for the Christmas tree trunk. And I'm just doing a little bit of Copic coloring shading by just adding a second layer in certain areas. Now I decide, okay, this fireplace could be brick red, or it could be more kind of terracotta or vintagey color with this brown. So I thought I would try first to kind of just color the lower left part, the left and bottom part of each brick. And I thought I could also repeat the craft color in the frame of the picture. I'm going to just do a tiny bit of shading on the snow, icy parts of the village scene, as well as a little bit of shadowing on the bone. And I'm feeling like this fireplace is looking a little blah. So I decide I'm going to add some of the red to the bricks. And you're thinking right now, oh my gosh, Christina's totally crazy. She's lost it. The red and the tan craft color will never blend together. I'm adding this kind of corally color. It's a light prawn, and I'm liking it better. It's covered up some of that craft color, but I'm going back in because I thought that the white was too stark. So I'm filling that in with the craft colored E31. Which is actually a kind of a beige. They call it a brick beige. So, the name is apropos for the bricks of a fireplace. Now I've decided I'm going to go back in a little bit more. I want a little bit more richness in the bricks. I also decided I'm going to doodle in onto the fireplace log as well as on the Christmas tree, some more wood grain with my Copic multiliner pen. And I'm liking it better, but it's missing something. So I try and fill in the back of the fireplace with just a gray color. It's kind of a mid-tone gray. I think that's a C3. And I'm coloring a little bit of shadowing into the snow on the village scene. And I decide I'm going to color in just a pale blue sky. That's a B000, which is very, very pale. But I add a couple of coats toward the top of the picture so that it can get a little bit more of a rich feel for the picture. And now I'm really hesitating. I don't know what exactly to do. And you'll see next I move on to just a little bit of shading on the puppy. I'm struggling with this picture. But at the end, you'll be relieved to know that I actually end up liking how it all comes out. But at this point, I'm just moving to other parts of the image that I am more confident about. And this is it. I'm finally deciding I'm going to bite the bullet and add black. This is 100, which is a marker that I rarely use. But I thought for kind of a more modern scene like this kind of cartoony image, I thought adding these pops of black would really help modernize the picture rather than having it be kind of vintage color with modern stamp images, kind of cartoony images. And I really do like how this came out. Adding the black really made the different parts of the scene pop, and I think adding little touches of it throughout the whole scene really helped, like adding to the fireplace, one of the house doors, the threshold, a couple of the windows, a little bit of that chapel roof. It really made everything seem more cohesive. Now I'm moving on to coloring the Christmas tree. I'm starting with kind of this pale green. It's a pistachio color, and then I'm adding a darker green, slightly darker. It's willow, and I wanted this green not to be a bright, bright green. I wanted it to be more of a muted green, and I wanted it to be light because I wanted the baubles and things to be able to stand up against the green of the Christmas tree. So I'm adding a couple of extra layers of shading with the darker green underneath each of the layers of the Christmas tree, and I'm taking the lighter color and coloring, kind of flicking up toward the middle of each of the layers, and I think that ends up looking like a nice blended green on that Christmas tree. I'm adding a little bit more of the darker just underneath each of the layers. And now I thought that the rug looked too simple, so I'm adding little hash marks all along the edge. I'm using the dotted line from the stamped image to kind of tell me how far those hashes will go. And I decide I'm gonna color every other little square with my Copic multiliner. I could have used the 100 Copic marker, but instead I'm just using my Copic multiliner pen. And I really like how that carries that black across. And as kind of a finishing touch on these baubles, I'm taking a Uniball Signo white gel pen and adding little highlight lines to the baubles to add that kind of highlighted shine. And I also add that to the star and also to the core of the fire. And I think that adds nice little pops of white. Now for the card front, I decide I'm gonna add a Pretty Pink Posh Stitch Borders 2 die. And it's kind of got this cloud formation, and I thought that mimicked the thought bubble nicely. For the sentiment, I'm using Versamark ink, and I first prepped this black cardstock scrap with my EK powder tool so that it prevents the static from attracting too much of the embossing powder. I'm using a Ranger Extra Fine embossing powder, and I really like how the white from this embossing powder pops off of the black. And I was reaching for my dry paintbrush, and that's just to flick away some of the stray powder that did still cling to the cardstock. And I've already preheated my heating tool, but I'm heating the front and the back of the cardstock so that it doesn't warp too much. I find that if you heat the backside too, it kind of stays more flat. And there were a few extra little flecks of the white embossing powder that melted, so I'm just taking a black pen and covering up those little white specks. And anybody not knowing that I had done this little cheat would never know looking at the sentiment. And now I'm gonna just take my paper trimmer and trim away the sides, a little bit off the bottom and top, and I'm gonna make the left side of this sentiment piece just cut at an angle. I'm just trimming off a little bit more because I want the sentiment piece to be a little bit thinner. And now you'll see, I'm kind of struggling to figure out where to put the sentiment piece, because I was thinking I was going to put it just above the puppy, but then it covered up the thought bubbles. And as I'm thinking about where to put it, I thought I would put the rest of the card together. I'm using corrugated cardstock in craft color and layering that on top of my card base, which is a corally cardstock. Then I'm adding the card front that I've been working on top of that corrugated cardstock so that the bottom shows where I've die cut that piece out. And now I'm still struggling trying to figure out where to put that. I could have put that at the bottom like that, but I didn't want the die cut edge to be covered, so I decided to pop it up on the right side. And that's the completed card. I hope you've enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.